In the magical world of Ulf, an eternal war rages between mortals, who've got expiration dates, and immortals, who respawn like they've hacked the system. The war's fate hinged on a showdown between Graham, the mortal hero, and Velto, the demon lord with unlimited lives. Normally, Velto would mop the floor with any mortal, but Graham's holy sword dealt a blow so powerful it broke through Velto's endless regeneration and sent him packing. Velto, being a sore loser, swore he'd return for revenge before dramatically vanishing. Fast forward 500 years, and Velto's back, thanks to his ride-or-die servant, Makina, who's been waiting all this time. She apologizes for her casual Friday attire, but Velto's just stoked she managed to pull off his resurrection. Ready to conquer the world again, Velto quickly finds out things have changed, big time. Makina fills him in. 80 years ago, Ulf and Earth decided to fuse. The result? Most people died, governments fell apart, and cities turned into independent states. Now, Earth's tech and Ulf's magic have mashed together, creating a world that's both futuristic and mystical. Velto, of course, is completely blown away. As he's marveling at this new reality, Velto nearly bumps into a random guy on the street, annoyed that no one recognizes his god-tier presence. So, naturally, he tries to flex with some grand magic. The city's reaction? A collective eye roll and an alarm turns out. Using big magic in public is a no-no. Velto's forced to bail before getting busted, but not before spotting someone who looks an awful lot like Graham, his old nemesis. Once they're safe, Makina drops more bad news. After Velto's defeat, mortals got smart, invented anti-immortal weapons, and nearly wiped out his kind. His dark peers? Mostly missing, dead, or sacrificed themselves for his grand comeback. Talk about loyalty. Later, Velto stumbles across a young hacker messing with giant billboards, throwing up some spicy content for fun. Impressed, he asks if she knows where to find Marcus, one of his old subordinates. She points him to a tower, where Marcus has now risen to CEO status. Fancy, right? Velto storms in, expecting the usual bowing and scraping. Instead, Marcus, sitting like a smug king, laughs in his face. Turns out, Marcus has no interest in rebuilding the immortal kingdom. Velto tries to remind Marcus who's boss, but Marcus's assistant effortlessly blocks his magic, leaving Velto stunned. Apparently, Marcus has leveled up way past him, and Velto, the once fearsome demon lord, is now just yesterday's news. Marcus had been waiting for this moment for years, savoring the chance to finally knock Velto off his high horse. With a smug grin, he dropped the news. Velto's once mighty strength was nothing more than a dusty old relic. Then, for dramatic flair, Marcus revealed a slick implant in the back of his neck. Velto, of course, had no idea what it was, so Marcus kindly pulled up a tutorial because, even villains need tech support sometimes. The implant, called a familia, was a magic game changer. Normally, spellcasting was like filling out an overly complicated tax form, a 5-step nightmare. But the familia let anyone, yes, even your average Joe, skip 3 of those steps and throw spells like a pro. And in case Velto was thinking of snagging one for himself, Marcus gleefully informed him that it was incompatible with higher beings like Velto. Velto, curious as ever, asked why Marcus was doing all of this. Marcus didn't hold back. He had loathed Velto from the moment they met. Velto had been a tyrant, arrogant, and worst of all, actually capable enough to justify that arrogance. Back then, Marcus had no choice but to grin and bear it, but now, well, the tables had turned. With a dramatic flair, Marcus unleashed a flurry of blood swords at Velto, who couldn't dodge fast enough and ended up getting stabbed multiple times before being launched out of a window. Marcus, finally free from Velto's shadow, declared himself the new demon lord. But in true office comedy fashion, his secretary immediately reminded him that they still had to discuss the company mascot's promotional campaign, so he waved her off to the next meeting. Meanwhile, Velto crash landed back in the city, and his regeneration was moving slower than a Monday morning. He staggered into the street, accidentally bumped into someone, and because things just weren't going his way, immediately lost a fight, finding himself face first in a pile of trash. Lying there, he couldn't help but wonder why he kept losing to mere mortals. It was starting to feel like a bad trend. Luckily, Makina came to the rescue, helping Velto onto a train while apologizing for not telling him about Marcus's betrayal sooner. Velto waved her off, saying even if she'd told him, he would have wanted to see it with his own eyes. When they arrived at her apartment, Velto, assuming the entire building belonged to her, was surprised when she led him to her tiny room. It turned out this was all she could afford on her salary. Touched by her loyalty, Velto pulled her close and thanked her for staying true to him all these years. Back in the day, Makina had been hunted by the people of her time, blamed for everything just because she was immortal. Their brilliant solution: toss her into a volcano. Fortunately for her, Velto had swooped in and saved the day. That was how they first met, and Velto, ever the smooth talker, offered her the chance to devote herself to him. From that day forward, Makina remained his most loyal follower. The next morning, Makina got up early to make breakfast, checking in with her virtual assistant Elate, a mini version of herself that rattled off the day's forecast and schedule. When Velto sat down to eat, the unfamiliar food smelled incredible, and sure enough, it tasted just as good. After breakfast, Velto asked her about the Familia. Curious about its perks, he wanted to know if she'd heard of any other immortals. Makina mentioned that a few had survived the immortal hunts, though she'd lost contact with two close friends. Mysteriously, they had disappeared, leaving only a cryptic note behind. As Velto read the note, his hand suddenly flinched from the sharp pain of his still healing wounds, spilling tea everywhere. His once godlike regeneration had slowed to a crawl, and even his spellcasting had become a shadow of what it used to be. Makina speculated it was because the faith that had powered him in his prime had dwindled, reduced to mere history book footnotes. Velto, ever the strategist, decided it was time to make himself known again. They headed out into the city for some shopping. Makina led Velto to a store and had his body scanned for new clothes, apologizing for the budget options. Velto, always confident in his natural beauty, didn't mind. The store's virtual assistant suggested a tracksuit, which Velto loved, especially when he found out the symbols on the back spelled out Demon Lord. Later, over fast food, Velto asked Makina what it was like to have a Familia installed. Despite Marcus's betrayal, he had to admit that the Familia was an incredible device, making magic easier and doubling as a one-stop shop for everything from communication to information gathering. Makina reminisced about the pre-Familia days when people had to fumble around with smartphones. How quaint. Velto asks Makina to show him her Familia implant. As he starts inspecting it, she's caught off guard, but not in a bad way, so much so that her Familia warns her that her heart rate just shot up. When he's done, Velto casually asks if it's uncomfortable having something like that jammed into the back of her neck. Makina admits it was strange at first, but once it became illegal for companies to stream ads directly into people's heads, everyone kind of had to get used to it. Life without a Familia is practically impossible now, though it's clear it hasn't exactly improved Makina's living situation. As they walk home, Velto declares that he's going to get a job. Makina's eyes nearly pop out of her head, and she quickly assures him that he doesn't need to do anything as lowly as work. Sure, her life's a bit of a financial mess, but she'll just take on more shifts, maybe even juggle 2 or 3 jobs. Velto interrupts, reminding her that times have changed. He's no longer the almighty god he once was, and besides, it wouldn't feel right sitting around while Makina busts her chops to provide for him. No royal duties to keep him busy means he's got to adapt. But don't worry, world domination is still on the table. He asks if she'll stick with him, and Makina swears her loyalty forever. Later, Velto is about to head out to look for a job, but Makina won't let him go alone. She's worried something will go wrong, so she offers to call off work and tag along. Velto tells her no way, what if he doesn't land a job, and they still need her income. Makina reluctantly agrees, handing him a device with some emergency cash and a tracker, because, of course, she's already in overprotective mode. Out on the streets, Velto realizes he's clueless about how to actually get a job. Desperate, he starts shouting that he's broke and needs work. One guy approaches and, after telling Velto to keep it down, suggests he head to the commercial guild with a citizen ID. Velto, confused, reveals he doesn't even know what that is. The guy assumes Velto must be an immigrant, offers some advice, and warns him to stay clear of any jobs under the shady EMA company, especially in construction, where safety regulations are just a suggestion. Velto heads to the commercial guild and, during the interview, proudly lists wide-scale annihilation magic, dungeon creation, and leading a nation 500 years ago as his key skills. The interviewer, unimpressed, informs him there's no job for someone with his, unique qualifications. Besides, Velto's lack of a familia makes him ineligible for hire anyway. Velto returns home feeling defeated, so he collapses onto Makina's lap and asks if he's really become useless in this world. She reassures him that he's still far superior to everyone else so much so that he should just let her handle the work. But Velto's too stubborn to sit idle and asks if there's anyone she can call for help. It turns out Makina has someone in mind. Velto's shocked to hear she has a friend, but Makina insists that even though they hang out, eat together, and have sleepovers, it doesn't mean they're friends. A little while later, they meet up with Makina's not a friend at a cafe. And surprise, it's the hacker girl Velto ran into the day before. She introduces herself as Takahashi and is immediately starstruck. She starts poking Velto to make sure he's real, but Makina snaps at her for being disrespectful. Velto brushes it off after all. He's the one asking her for help here. Curious about her familia, Velto reaches over to inspect Takahashi's implant, and while she's startled at first, she lets him finish. Velto apologizes, explaining he noticed her familia was different from Makina's and wanted to check it out. Takahashi, amazed by his abilities, learns that Velto has a Sage Eye power, allowing him to analyze the mana flow in anything he touches. Despite his insight, there are still some things about the familia he can't fully figure out yet. Now, to the real reason they're there. Velto needs work, and since the guild turned him down, Takahashi has to come up with an alternative. After a quick brainstorm, Takahashi lands on the perfect solution. A 5-year-old demon lord with a great voice, a handsome face, and no familia? The answer is clear. Velto is going to become a streamer. Takahashi, with a glint in her eye, explains how streamers rake in cash just by doing stuff on camera thanks to ad money and fan donations. She's even got some leftover gear from her own streaming days, although it's a bit on the vintage side. Makina, however, is firmly against the idea, saying streaming is as reliable as a weather forecast in a hurricane and suggests he consider a real job, like flipping burgers. But Takahashi thinks otherwise, pointing out that Velto's got the looks, voice, and sheer aura that could turn him into the next internet sensation. Reluctantly, Makina admits Velto is kind of charming, but she's still not sold on his path to digital stardom. Velto figures he might as well give it a shot. So, later that evening, while Makina's taking a bath, Velto dives into research on the internet. He's awestruck by its reach until he realizes it's mostly cat videos and questionable content. Nonetheless, he figures he could use this to his advantage. A couple hours later, Takahashi shows up with her dusty equipment. She hands Velto a controller, but he surprises her by navigating the interface like he was born holding a gamepad. He picks Bloodborne, which Takahashi warns is the rage quit champ of all games. Still, Velto gets nowhere. After hours of play, he can barely make it past the intro. Takahashi bluntly tells him he's terrible, and while Makina thinks she's being harsh, Velto admits he's struggling. Makina worries this could doom his streaming career, but Takahashi thinks his hot guy who fails confidently vibe might just make him internet gold. Next on the agenda, crafting a memorable intro, since the world is drowning in streamers and only a handful actually make money. Velto thinks he could just say his name, but Takahashi shoots that down fast. Makina suggests he go full warden mode with a grand, foolish mortals declaration, which he gives a shot. Takahashi's into it, but thinks it needs more oomph. Then comes streaming 101. Keep it daily, avoid touchy topics unless he wants a swift ban, and make sure Makina's never seen on camera to dodge any girlfriend rumors. Takahashi even ropes in a friend to promote Velto's stream as a favor. Time passes, and Velto starts gaining viewers. His confidence and unflappable attitude toward trolls who he actually encourages to roast him end up working in his favor. Eventually, he hits 1 million views and decides to commemorate the milestone with an all-nighter to finish Bloodborne 3. Fans are glued to the screen, and as fate would have it, just as Makina returns home, Velto finally clears the game. Exhausted but exhilarated, he thanks his viewers, both loyal and trollish, and ends the stream. As Makina checks in on him, Velto decides to head out for a quick walk to pick up a package, and Makina offers to have dinner ready when he returns. Strolling through the city's rougher neighborhoods, Velto unexpectedly spots a familiar face, Graham, his sworn enemy from another life, sitting on the sidewalk. Once a dutiful brother, Graham had gone herb picking to help his sick sister, only to return and find his home and family turned to ashes. Now, they're sitting at a noodle shop, both fully aware of the irony. Velto tries breaking the tension with talk about noodles, but Graham's understandably terse. When the noodles arrive, Graham bluntly admits it's surreal sharing a meal with the enemy who destroyed his life. Velto feels the same, considering Graham once slayed countless of Velto's allies. When Velto asks how Graham's still kicking, Graham explains he was granted eternal youth by the goddess Melia after defeating Velto. Apparently, she had a soft spot for Graham. Velto muses that this world probably wouldn't let someone so powerful off the hook anyway. Graham shares that after ending the war, people inexplicably turned on him, and he spent centuries wandering, lost to both mortals and immortals. When he asks Velto why he tried ruling in the first place, Velto explains he saw it as the only way to create world peace, since people seemed doomed to hate and persecute each other. Graham can't endorse Velto's approach, but he admits that people left to their own devices aren't likely to find peace either. With a mutual nod of respect, they part ways, and Graham thanks Velto for the noodles. As Velto continues on, he spots Takahashi in an alley, squaring off against a rough-looking ogre who's demanding double pay for a job. Velto intervenes, catching the ogre's punch mid-air. The ogre, however, recognizes him as the guy he beat up previously, so he isn't worried. Takahashi warns Velto to leave, but he's itching to test how much power he's gained since hitting 1 million views. The ogre activates wind magic, shattering Velto's arm, but Velto regenerates it instantly and knocks the ogre into a pile of trash, much to Takahashi's amazement. She then asks Velto to be her bodyguard for the day, promising to pay him. Since he still owes her a favor, Velto agrees. Takahashi leads him to a warehouse, explaining her plan to swipe something valuable inside. Before she can finish explaining, Velto, in true fashion, kicks the door open, accidentally barging into a major Yakuza operation. Velto, looking a bit lost, pings Takahashi over the comms. "Hey, is that cube thing on the table our target?" She confirms but can't hide her confusion. How is he even contacting her without a familia? Smugly, Velto explains he just borrowed the communication ether the familia uses and recreated it with magic. Simple enough. With only a few goons around, he figures he'll handle them quickly and grab the cube. Takahashi insists on 0 fatalities, so he reluctantly agrees, and for style points, he starts the fight with his iconic streaming intro, which falls flat, since the Yakuza aren't exactly his core audience. The awkward silence is a reminder. 1 million followers might feel like a lot online, but they aren't in this room. No matter, he'll just show these guys what they're missing out on. The Yakuza, baffled by the situation, assume Velto's some sort of eccentric and start shooting, magic guns blazing. Velto shrugs it off, enhancing himself to deflect bullets until his attacker's out of ammo. then easily starts knocking them out like it's a casual workout. Desperate, one Yakuza reaches for a regular gun, but Takahashi steps in, casting an illusion that makes him accidentally shoot his partner instead. Soon, the room's cleared, and Veltal inspects a strange card ammo gun as Takahashi strolls in, duly impressed. Time to grab the box and make a run for it, except trouble just rolled in. Suddenly, an invisible force attacks Veltal. He blasts it with his new gun, revealing a giant mech. Takahashi identifies it as top-tier Magino gear, something way out of the Yakuza's price range. Intrigued by the challenge, Veltal opens fire, but predictably, his weapon barely scratches the mech. The pilot responds with a much bigger magic gun, but Veltal's quicker and finds a blind spot overhead. He drops down with a blast that would flatten a small building, though it's not quite enough for this heavyweight. No problem, he draws his sword, and, as if on cue, the mech's weapon morphs into a matching blade. They charge. Just as Veltal's getting into the rhythm, the mech pilot gets serious, catching Veltal off guard and managing to slice off his arm and, well, his head. The pilot smugly reports Veltal's demise until Veltal's decapitated head starts speaking, complimenting his skills but scolding him for not double-checking the kill. As a reward for an exciting battle, Veltal summons his ultimate weapon, Vernal, with an aura so intense the mech pilot can only stare in horror. Veltal dismantles the mech piece by piece until the pilot, desperately, activates a self-execution protocol to keep any intel from leaking. Takahashi finally emerges, visibly shaken, but Veltal's unfazed. He's actually more impressed by the weaponry than anything, muttering about how terrifying this time period must be. Takahashi, on the other hand, thinks he's the real terror, considering he just trashed a war-grade mech built by Marcus's company, something even the Yakuza wouldn't dare buy. This mission just got a lot messier. Turning their attention to the cube, Takahashi explains it's a high-tech storage device. She pulls up a list of names on her reader, and Veltal's eyes narrow. These are his immortal subjects. Takahashi tries contacting her client, but with no answer, they decide to pay him a visit. She leads Veltal to the high-security apartment, hacks them in like it's nothing, and they head to the elevator. Veltal insists on pushing the button because, well, he just likes pressing buttons. Takahashi tells him it's not so simple. This elevator requires a bizarre floor sequence before it'll take them to the 13th. Veltal's ready to head out, but Takahashi stops him, warning of her client's paranoid traps. Veltal chuckles luckily. It looks like all the traps have mysteriously disarmed themselves. When they finally reach Eju's front door, Takahashi rings the bell. No answer. It's weird. Eju may dodge phone calls, but he never leaves a knock unanswered. Suspicious, Veltal nudges the door, and it swings open. This is odd. Eju's the last person to leave his door unlocked. Red flags waving, Veltal suggests they proceed with caution. Takahashi takes the lead toward Eju's workroom, where they find him slumped in his chair, soaked in blood and unmistakably dead. Takahashi panics, but Veltal keeps his cool, leaning in to inspect. He recalls seeing this guy before, though back then, he was dressed in a heap of trash. Takahashi nods, explaining that's just Eju's style when gathering intel. Examining the wounds, a chest stab, a neck gash, and the state of the blood, Veltal deduces Eju's been dead a few days. Given the surgical efficiency of the killing, this wasn't a crime of passion. It screams hitman. Whoever did this even destroyed Eju's familia to bury his intel. Seems someone wanted whatever Eju knew gone for good, and it might just be connected to the job he'd hired Takahashi for. She takes a beat, then starts searching the room, confident Eju would have hidden extra data in case something like this happened. Sure enough, she unearths a laptop in a hidden drawer, but the files are a garbled mess. Veltal spots a pattern and points it out, allowing Takahashi to piece the fragments together, finally revealing a video message from Eju. In it, he explains he made the recording in case he was killed before finishing his investigation. According to Eju, the city's prosperity is built on a terrifying truth. The ether reactor at the heart of the city, which should require power from 10 ley lines, somehow runs off just 2. He's uncovered that it's drawing extra power from the Immortal Furnace project. This twisted machine burns immortal souls as fuel, producing energy far greater than what mortal souls could ever yield. Edu's intel reveals that Marcus's company employed homeless people to build the furnace. But once it was completed, they all vanished, likely killed to become fuel as well. Worse, one of Veltal's own trusted subordinates, Zeno, was among the first immortals sacrificed. This was all Marcus's plan: turn public opinion against immortals so he could harvest them under the guise of justice, then burn their souls for ether. Recently, Marcus even bought intel from the Yakuza on more immortals, a sure sign his supply is running low. When the video ends, Takahashi is furious at how immortals are being treated, though she knows that trying to expose this would probably get her killed, just like Edu. Veltal reassures her that this is an immortal's problem, and as their king, it's his duty to fix it. For now, they notify the authorities about Edu's death to ensure he gets a proper burial. As they leave, Veltal attempts to contact Machina to inform her about the furnace, but to his shock, she isn't responding. Something is seriously wrong. As Veltal heads out on an errand, Machina decides it's dinner prep time. She checks the fridge, but, to no one's surprise, finds the same sorry leftovers as last time. Luckily, her AI buddy, Elect, suggests she can still scrape together a decent curry. Just as she's about to start, the doorbell rings. Reluctantly, she goes to answer it only to find herself face to face with Marcus. For everything he's done, there's only one fitting reaction. She unleashes a massive burst of fire, engulfing him in flames and sending him flying. Unfortunately, Marcus, just as immortal as Machina, shrugs off the fire. Seeing he's here to cause trouble, she transforms and steps outside to confront him head-on. Machina quickly disconnects her familia from the network, blocking any potential hacks from Marcus, and the two begin trading attacks, launching magic weapons that light up the night. They seem evenly matched until Machina spots her moment and seizes Marcus's arm, causing it to explode in her grasp. For a second, it looks like she's gotten the upper hand, but Marcus regenerates the arm with chilling ease and counters with a massive bloody sword rain, detonating the area. Thanks to her shield, Machina is unharmed. But her house takes the brunt of it, something her lack of fire insurance isn't going to fix. Just then, Marcus's secretary emerges from the smoke, attempting to take Machina down with a surprise strike. Machina dodges effortlessly, leaving her opponent slashing at an illusion, but she knew Marcus would bring backup. She prepares to incinerate the secretary, but Marcus activates a hidden ability, Code Breaker. Suddenly, Machina's familia is shut down entirely. Disoriented, she stumbles, giving the secretary a chance to strike, landing a brutal stab through Machina's chest. Machina collapses, powerless, as Marcus and his secretary stand over her. The secretary scolds him for risking both of their lives when he could have disabled her familia from the start. Marcus, however, is too busy savoring the sight of Machina defeated. Machina demands to know what he's done to her. Smugly, Marcus explains his new familia prototype, a cutting-edge model with admin access to every familia in the city through a hidden back door. As the director of EME, he can shut down any familia at will, making him essentially unbeatable in a city full of familia users. For him, this isn't just about strength. He's after total domination. He dreams of becoming the new Demon Lord, controlling the world not with brute force like Veltal, but with information and technology. His ambition is clear: to outdo Veltal's old legacy and bring the entire world under his thumb. But his monologue is cut short by the secretary, who reminds him they're running late for his next appointment. Marcus decides to wrap things up, announcing it's time for Machina to become fuel for the Immortal Furnace. When Veltal and his companion, Takahashi, return home later, they find the place completely destroyed, with no sign of Machina except a scorched game controller. The sight of the destruction, and Machina's absence, leaves Veltal shattered. She was the one person he truly cared for in this world. Lost in grief, He barely registers Takahashi's question about his state of mind. Realizing standing around won't help, he asks her if there's any info on what happened. Takahashi taps into the social media chatter, which vaguely mentions an explosion, but nothing concrete. Veltol wishes there was a way to track Machina's location, so Takahashi suggests they check the delivery drones around the area. She hacks into the nearby drones and quickly pulls up footage from their cameras, revealing the battle. The feed shows Marcus defeating Machina, then dragging her away to the city's restricted reactor sector, indicating he's planning to use her soul to fuel the city. Veltol thanks Takahashi and starts toward the reactor immediately, but Takahashi urges him to think it through. The reactor is the most secure area in the city, crawling with Magino gears, and Veltol would be outmatched alone. Though Takahashi can help him get in, she's no fighter, so he'll need someone powerful by his side. The only option Veltol has left is an old ally turned enemy, Graham. Despite their bitter history, Veltol finds Graham and pleads for his help. At first, Graham rejects him outright, angry over Veltol's past crimes, the wars he waged, and the loved ones he lost because of him. But when the proud Veltol kneels, explaining Machina's plight and the reactor's dark purpose, Graham reluctantly agrees. He despises what the reactor represents, even if it means siding temporarily with his old foe. He makes it clear he's only doing this for justice, not for Veltol, and he hasn't forgiven Veltol's past sins. But a kidnapped woman's life is on the line, so Graham will join him. Hello, I'm Bubblecap. No, scratch that. Veltol, if you're enjoying the chaos, hit subscribe and like. Otherwise, you might end up on my list of things to destroy, and trust me, I'm good at it. Takahashi finds a hidden path into the reactor, a supply route used during its construction. They'll avoid the main security, but the path is a maze. While Veltol worries about wasting time in the maze, Graham confidently casts auto-mapping, generating a detailed map of the entire labyrinth. Veltol is outraged. Graham's spell trivializes the traps he painstakingly set up in his old dungeons. But Graham dismisses his complaints, saying his goal was always to get through dungeons as efficiently as possible. Frustrated, Veltol argues about an adventurer's pride, but Takahashi snaps, demanding they stop bickering and focus on rescuing Machina. They apologize and press on. As they navigate the maze, Graham assures Veltol his map also detects traps and enemies, and luckily, this passage appears unguarded. Veltol, apologizing again to Takahashi for his earlier outburst, checks in on her progress. She's been working hard on her end, preparing something crucial for their mission. It's going to take time, and she's uncertain if it'll be ready by the time they reach the reactor. But she's determined to make it work. Veltol's sworn to save Machina, expose Marcus's sinister scheme, and set right the city's corruption. But time is running out. They find the lift that'll take them down to the reactor core. Veltol takes a steadying breath as they begin their descent, the air thickening with dense ether that's messing with their comms. Before the static cuts her off, Takahashi promises she'll have everything ready on her end. Veltol glances at Graham, who throws him a knowing look and comments, "You've changed, you know." The old Veltol would have let Machina burn before bowing to his worst enemy. This you, I almost respect. Uncertain what Graham means, Veltol scoffs, pointing out he's a long way from his old strength. But Graham just shakes his head. "Not that strength," he says with a grin. "You've got the kind that matters. If you'd been like this back then, well, let's just say that fight would have turned out differently." Finally, the lift stops. Stepping off, Veltol and Graham come face to face with Marcus's secretary, looking annoyingly calm and ready to rumble. She smirks, announcing that Marcus has been expecting him. Seems she's more than ready to keep them busy while Marcus finishes his own twisted plans. Marcus, with a sinister grin, has Machina pinned and is toying with her as they hover near the reactor's core. After Veltol's revival, Marcus dug into the lives of his old comrades, and that's when he unearthed Machina's surprising survival. Over the years, he'd orchestrated the deaths of countless immortals, yet she had somehow managed to lay low within the city. Marcus smugly informs her that this place is known as the Immortal Furnace, a place that burns immortal souls as fuel to power the city. Machina, initially puzzled by his monologue, soon recalls the two missing subordinates. She quickly pieces it together: those poor souls must have been fed into the furnace. Marcus recounts their fearful expressions as their souls burned, enjoying their torment to the point of making a mixtape out of their screams. When Machina demands to know if he plans to use her as fuel, the answer is obvious. He explains that the last immortal to be burned was about to run out of steam, and he didn't feel like dealing with immortal rights activists, so he personally came to collect her. He's convinced her soul will burn for a couple of years, which gives him a nice break from worrying about refueling. Meanwhile, his secretary, who's been tasked with delaying Veltol, is caught off guard when she learns he brought Graham, the hero, along. She recognizes him from the files, although she's more interested in getting the job done than in his history. Graham tells Veltol to go ahead while he keeps the secretary busy, but warns him to be careful. This secretary's skills are on par with the infamous Zal, a karmic swordsman. However, Graham's no slouch. He remembers dismantling Zal during the Immortal War, so he's not worried. The secretary, eager to prove herself, charges at Graham with mind-blowing speed. Graham barely manages to defend himself, but as the fight intensifies, Veltol takes off for Machina. The secretary, unwilling to let him slip by, activates her zero-base gear, transforming into a lightning-fast warrior with a brand-new, prototype Magino suit. She dashes forward, practically knocking Graham through the floor. However, despite her impressive tech, Graham remains unshaken, calling her a relic of the future. The fight becomes a fast-paced blur of parries and slashes, with Graham struggling to find a way through her advanced defenses. He realizes her lightning-fast attack only happens when her sword is sheathed and decides to use that knowledge to his advantage. Yet, the secretary, confident in her superior equipment and speed, keeps attacking, unleashing devastating speed. Graham, however, starts turning the tables. He casts spells to manipulate the environment, using earth and ice magic to slow her down and corner her. The secretary is sent crashing into the wall by a fiery explosion, but her armor takes the brunt of the damage. As the fight continues, Graham begins to show signs of success. His tactics are working, and the secretary's frustration grows as she realizes she's struggling against a fossil. When she launches one last attack with all her mana, confident she'll crush him with a full-powered strike, Graham has a surprise for her. He counters with the ultimate technique that once felled Veltol, calling upon the power of his ancient sword. Despite its age, the sword's power reignites. With a confident grin, Graham tells the secretary she's about to get a taste of history. The secretary, still determined to defeat Graham, keeps up the fight, but as the glow from his sword swells, she has an epiphany. Unfortunately for her, the moment of realization comes a bit too late. With a single swing, Graham unleashes a devastating strike, his sword only tapping into a fraction of his prime power. Yet it's still enough to obliterate her Magino gear. With the secretary staring at him in disbelief, Graham calmly sits down next to her, explaining that her loss wasn't due to lack of effort, it was experience. After all, he's got over 500 years under his belt. She, still confused, asks why he's heading off to help Veltol. Graham shrugs it off, confident that Veltol can handle himself. The secretary scoffs, declaring Veltol doesn't stand a chance against Marcus, not without a familia, anyway. Graham doesn't seem too concerned, though. He's well aware of Veltol's trump card, the one thing Marcus doesn't know about. Only Graham knows what's lurking there, thanks to their near-death match. Veltol, he believes, has this fight in the bag. He's just here to make sure no one gets in the way. Meanwhile, down at the core, Marcus is wrapping up his monologue with Machina, holding her by the throat and preparing to toss her into the furnace. But as she plummets toward her fate, her mind isn't on her doom, it's on Veltol. Then, in a dramatic twist, a cloud of black smoke swoops in, snatching her from the air and flying her back to safety. When Machina opens her eyes, she finds Veltol standing over her, ready to save the day. Marcus, not one for small talk, feigns indifference but can't resist congratulating Veltal on his million-subscriber milestone. But Veltal isn't here for pleasantries. He asks if Marcus has any good reason for burning the souls of immortals. Marcus, naturally, answers with a resounding no. Then, Veltal drops the bomb. Will Marcus ever swear loyalty to him again? Marcus scoffs, immediately declaring he'll never serve under Veltal again. And with that, Veltal pulls out his demonic sword and declares the end of Marcus' immortal life. Marcus is unfazed and responds by launching a barrage of blood spears. Despite Veltal's efforts to deflect, Marcus makes sure to trigger explosions that catch him off guard. When he pulls out a blood sword for close combat, it seems like Marcus has the upper hand. But Veltal emerges unharmed, charging with strength-enhancing magic that Marcus cannot cancel. Despite this, Marcus outmaneuvers and overpowers Veltal in melee, knocking him to the ground and savoring his rival's defeat. Unyielding, Veltal vows to punish Marcus for his crimes against the immortals. Marcus mocks his resolve, claiming Veltal's reign as Demon Lord is ancient history. As Marcus dashes around to taunt him, Veltal intercepts a sneak attack and strikes at Marcus's familia system. Marcus narrowly counters, redirecting the blow to sever his head, which he quickly regenerates. Recovering, Marcus reveals he anticipated the attack and retaliates with bloody bomb spells, leaving Veltal charred and broken. Yet, as Marcus turns to throw Machina into the immortal furnace, a suffocating pressure stops him. Veltal rises, more powerful than ever, commending Marcus's strength but refusing to lose. He offers Marcus a chance to repent and serve under him again. But Marcus, enraged, rejects the offer, declaring his intent to annihilate Veltal and all immortals. Veltal, now wielding proclaim magic that requires no incantations, disrupts Marcus's spells. Stunned, Marcus tries summoning his blood sword, but Veltal disables his familia entirely. Helpless, Marcus collapses, his plans unraveled. When he attempts to speak, Veltal silences him with an explosion inside his mouth and bombards him with relentless magic. Regenerating repeatedly, Marcus is overwhelmed as Veltal hacks into his familia, inducing mind-breaking illusions. Begging for his life, Marcus offers to serve Veltal again, but Veltal reminds him of the chances he squandered. Hoisting Marcus with his sword, Veltal dangles him over the immortal furnace. Marcus argues that his death gains nothing, but Veltal retorts that it sustains the furnace until an alternative energy source is found. Accusing Veltal of hypocrisy, Marcus makes a last-ditch attack, but Veltal scrapes him off the blade and lets him fall into the furnace, disintegrating entirely. With Marcus defeated, Machina is freed, and Veltal returns to normal. Humbled by the ordeal, he confesses his love for Machina, appreciating life anew. A bored blonde girl sits in class, ignoring her classmates' taunts, until the teacher announces 2 new transfer students. The first is Veltal, who confidently introduces himself, vowing to make an impact on the city. After defeating Marcus, Veltal's life settles into a new rhythm. He continues his streaming career, recently completing a grueling 10-hour game during a 3-day marathon. Viewers doubted he could succeed, but Veltal's determination saw him triumph. Machina, cheering him on from the next room, congratulates him afterward but gently reminds him to take breaks, as his marathon left her feeling neglected. Veltal apologizes, promising to make it up to her. Reflecting on their progress, he notes his channel now boasts 3 million subscribers, and they've moved out of Machina's old apartment. Machina proposes celebrating with sushi, but Veltal brushes it off, considering the milestone trivial. To him, the real achievement is unlocking the second form of his dark sword, designed to defeat immortals. Despite her dislike of sushi, Machina insists on celebrating, leaving Veltal puzzled but uninterested in arguing. Shifting focus, Veltal discusses their next mission, locating the missing Dark Peers Raylan, Jewel, and May. He believes they're alive, as Marcus would have gloated about their deaths. He recalls the Dark Peer records, an artifact capable of tracking their mana signatures, But Machina reveals the records vanished long ago, complicating their search. Their discussion is interrupted by Takahashi, their ally, who surprises Veltal by showing up in a school uniform. He's stunned to learn she's still a student despite her illicit activities, but she shrugs it off and congratulates him on his stream. When Veltal worries about its reception, Takahashi reassures him that long streams are popular as background noise. When Veltal mentions the Dark Pier records, Takahashi eagerly offers her hacking skills to locate the artifact. Despite Machina's doubts, Takahashi uncovers a lead. The records may be hidden in a sealed treasure vault beneath Lewell Academy, a prestigious magic school in Akihabara City. Veltal proposes enrolling as students to investigate covertly, and Takahashi forges the necessary documents. Upon arriving in Akihabara City, Veltal is awed by its magical advancements, particularly its prosthetics capable of replacing entire bodies. However, he finds the Academy's design underwhelming compared to the rest of the city. Inside the Academy, they meet Principal Trot Goal, leader of one of the city's 3 great houses. To Takahashi's surprise, Trot accepts their forged documents after recognizing Veltal's name. When asked why they're enrolling, Veltal openly admits his interest in the treasure vault beneath the school. Trot doesn't object but explains the vault is sealed and can only be opened with the Goal Blade, Shepherd Crown, and Rionar Orb, artifacts held by the 3 great houses. Unfortunately, the Rionar Orb is missing, presenting a new challenge for their mission. With their admission secured, the group attends their first class. Veltal immediately causes a stir when he accidentally breaks a magical crystal used to measure his power. During a lecture on soul channeling, Veltal further surprises the class by demonstrating an almost supernatural knowledge of ancient magical history. His detailed recounting of the rail rod incident catches everyone's attention, as he speaks as if he were a first-hand witness. One student, Hizuki Rionar, watches from a distance, intrigued but hesitant to approach. At lunch, Hizuki is approached by Albert, a haughty classmate who ridicules her lack of magical talent and mocks her parents. Albert insults her father's failures and derides her elf mother's decision to have a child with him. Hizuki, however, refuses to let his harsh words slide, standing her ground and defending her family's honor. Annoyed that Albert's arrogance ruined his peaceful udon meal, Veltal criticizes his hypocrisy. Albert fires back, mocking Veltal's streaming career, but Veltal counters by pointing out that Albert must be a viewer, sarcastically thanking him for boosting his ad revenue. Furious, Albert denies being a fan and declares himself the eldest son of the prestigious Holmes family. Recognizing the name, Veltal recalls Gainel Holmes, Albert's ancestor, who fled from him in battle long ago. Amused by the irony, Veltal forgives Albert for disrupting his meal, but questions why he was mocking Hizuki, who, in his view, has far more talent than Albert. Incensed by Veltal's remarks, Albert formally challenges him to a duel. At the school stadium, Machina and Takahashi sit with Hizuki. Takahashi bluntly asks why Hizuki is an outcast. Hizuki explains that while she excels academically, her inability to use magic makes her a target. When Takahashi questions why she attends a magic school, Hizuki insists she has her reasons. Machina shifts the subject, surprised the academy allows duels. Hizuki explains that combat training is encouraged, provided a teacher supervises. Miss Mag oversees the duel and urges the combatants to finish quickly as lunch break is almost over. Veltal confidently tells Hizuki to watch closely, promising to show her his greatness. Albert warns him not to be overconfident, boasting about his perfect scores in mana release, manipulation, and reserves. Veltal, unfazed, notes that Hizuki actually has larger mana reserves, leaving Hizuki shocked since she received a failing grade in that area. Veltal insists the school made a mistake, but Albert dismisses the claim, demanding the duel begin. To handicap himself, Veltal vows not to move from his spot, agreeing to obey Albert's demands if he loses. If he wins, Albert must stop harassing Hizuki. Despite Hizuki's protests, both have sworn on their names, making the duel unavoidable. Albert casts a powerful spell, but Veltal mocks him, urging him to use all his mana. Provoked, Albert unleashes a fully charged magic arrow, only for Veltal to catch it effortlessly. Praising Albert's effort, Veltal declares it insufficient to move him. To demonstrate true magic, he fires a small, compressed mana shot, knocking Albert unconscious. Veltal is declared the winner and dedicates his victory to Izuki, who thanks him but warns him to stay away, fearing her presence will cause trouble. After school, Veltal, Mishina, and Takahashi explore the city. Takahashi complains about the Academy's ban on familiars and jokingly suggests breaking the treasure vault's seal with magic. Veltal explains that such an act would trigger a self-destruct mechanism, so they must gather the regalias, the Gold Blade, Shepherd Crown, and Rionar Orb. The first two are accounted for, but the Rionar Orb is missing. Veltal notes that the Rionar family's head is Hizuki, giving them a potential lead. The group heads to Electric Town, a labyrinthine district, and Takahashi leads them to a maid cafe, claiming it's a prime spot for gathering gossip. Veltal apologizes for doubting her, but it becomes clear she chose the cafe purely for fun. Mishina is annoyed by the steep prices, but Takahashi insists it's worth it for the dream maid experience. As they settle in, Veltal remains distracted, concerned that Hizuki is intentionally avoiding others. Mishina agrees she seems like a good person and hopes they can befriend her. Takahashi, eager to enjoy the cafe, summons the maid with the most charm. To everyone's shock, their maid turns out to be Hizuki herself. Horrified to see her classmates, Hizuki freezes as the episode ends.